Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of the True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. My name's Daniel Harrison, Chief Executive at True Potential, and I'm joined today by Rebecca Wright, Jeff Casson, and Peter Bould. And you may notice we're in slightly different locations today. Jeff is in what looks like quite a posh room. Peter is that an office, Peter, with a chart behind you?
No, it's the kids' playroom.
The kids' playroom. And Rebecca, an office?
No, in the living room corner, as close to the router as I can get.
A living room with a dog walking around in the corner there as well, I can see.
Oh, can you see her?
Yeah.
She's behind me, apologies.
And I'm in the garden. So as you may have guessed, everybody, this is the first video cast which we're doing fully remotely. This is the beginning of the 3-week lockdown, which sounds a bit like a game show, but it's probably not as much fun, and there's no prizes at the end of it either. Or no Brucey bonus anyway. So welcome, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your first week of self-isolation. I hope you're all staying safe. And I hope everybody in the audience who listened to us today is staying safe as well. Really, I thought we'd cover 3 themes today, lady and gents. First one is about markets. It's been another interesting week in the markets. Next one is about the external world, what's happening away from the markets, really. What is True Potential doing to help other businesses? But what else are we seeing from the government side of things? And then finally bringing it back towards True Potential to talk about what our clients are asking right now, what type of help Rebecca and the team and everybody are giving. So, please enjoy today's show. Just to bring everybody up to date really with what's happening at True Potential, I think you all got a note from me on Tuesday morning, hot off the heels of the announcement from Boris on Monday night at about 8:30 p.m. So that led to a wee bit of a scramble on 8:30. We had a group text message sent out to all of our staff. We had email lists going out, just asking everybody to now work from home for the foreseeable, or at least 3 weeks, according to Boris. Things, I'm delighted to say, went incredibly smoothly. Rebecca and her team were all online at 8 a.m. Tuesday morning. The rest of the staff switched across, and it's been very much business as usual, which has been one of our big mantras at True Potential about how to make things just normal for you as our clients and as our advisors. Jeff, one thing which hasn't shut down is been markets. They're still going. They're not working from home by the looks of it. What's this week entailed, Jeff?
I think this week has been quite an interesting week for markets, just given the backdrop of our call last week when we talked about how weak markets has been. This week has provided us with a real contrast with global equity markets staging some of their biggest recoveries that we've seen since the 1930s, which is quite phenomenal, but maybe not when we think about the speed of the decline that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. So where are we today? We've seen the S&P rise 17% from its low, the FTSE rise 16% from its low. So quite material moves. If we think about a bear market has been defined as a 20% fall, and we're very close to a 20% rise, which in normal circumstances would be called a bull market. So a very contrasting week relative to last week for everyone. I think the other things that have been really interesting this week just to observe has been a relative degree of calm starting to come back into some of the financial stress indicators that we had been looking at over the past couple of weeks. So last week we mentioned how elevated volatility was at levels similar to what we had seen in the financial crisis of 2007, 8 and 9. Those volatility numbers have come back a little bit. Not surprising given how the equity market has performed, but that is a positive to see financial conditions start to stabilize to a degree. Indicates that at least the actions that central banks have taken to provide liquidity into the marketplace is having an impact. I think the other things that we've been looking at as a team is just the data that's been coming out. Clearly, economic data at this point in time, does it actually mean anything? Probably not. But what we can take from it is just the magnitude of and how swiftly the impact of COVID-19 has been felt in the economies across the globe. I think the key place that we're seeing that, probably the most notable one to think about, is the US jobs number that came out yesterday. 3.3 million people claiming unemployment benefit last week in the US. That's a number that is just unprecedented in history. I've used that word a few times in the past couple of weeks on our podcast, but that is just a number that has never been seen before. The highest number that we saw in the financial crisis was in March 2009 of 660,000 people on that claimant count. So 5 times higher than that, and 12 times higher than the number the previous week. So the implications of that in terms of the economy really speaks to why we've needed to see the significant stimulus packages that have been announced at a government level over the past number of weeks. So at least what we can say there is that in the majority of instances, governments have stepped up to the plate. Stimulus packages have been voted through. The only exception so far is we need to get the US package through the House of Representatives. Hopefully that comes today, and then that can be signed off.
So is that the hope, Jeff, to get that out today from the US side of things?
Yeah, so it was approved through the Senate earlier, I think yesterday, and then it needs to go to the House today. So hopefully that works its way through, and then President Trump can sign it off. The key thing for getting this done quickly is that given the jobs numbers that we're seeing, and we know the impact on the economy, that money needs to get into the economy as quick as possible to help individuals. So in the same way the UK has been coordinated, we had Jay Powell on CNBC yesterday just talking about what the Fed was doing. It's kind of the first time that I can remember in recent history that we've seen a Fed governor go on to sort of primetime TV to discuss something. And interestingly, he didn't get a barrage of Twitter critique from President Trump, which has kind of been the historical situation between the two. They haven't seen eye to eye, for want of a better word, but at least yesterday they seem to be on the same page. Hopefully that remains the case.
No, maybe they've done a bit of learning from the UK government at last, which is, a coordinated approach in one single message versus this quarrelling which we've seen over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and the market doesn't need to see that. The market does not need uncertainty. Much as we've got a lot of uncertainty at the minute from an economic perspective, it doesn't want the uncertainty that comes from a central bank governor being in a feud with the government, and the government challenging the independence of the central bank. What we need at this point in time is the two working together. As you rightly say, that's what we're seeing in the UK. And I think, that's a really interesting point for us to reflect on. And, if we go back maybe 12 months ago, we would be saying that the UK the government was quasi dysfunctional at times in what was trying to be achieved. We've actually moved forward. We've got a very coordinated response between Treasury and the MPC, and further evidence of that yesterday with the government's package for the self-employed. So UK really working together, the US kind of getting there, and then Europe somewhere in the middle. They don't seem to want to work together. Crisis usually pulls Europe together. It's just not evident that that's the case just yet, with the leaders walking out, or, well, not walking out, but ending their discussions yesterday without agreement on a Eurozone-wide stimulus package.
Yeah, hanging up remotely is the new walking out, isn't it? You just press your red button on the laptop and off you go.
It's much easier to achieve, isn't it?
It is. It's just a real easy way to take the huff. Just slam the lid down on the laptop and off you go. Peter, it's I don't think any of us, maybe, well, certainly towards the end of the year, we were full of kind of election, kind of like exhaustion, so to speak. But now you look at it in retrospect, you think, thank goodness, actually, majority government came through. Imagine, going back to Jeff's earlier point there about 12 months ago, the dysfunctional government which we had, you couldn't get anything agreed because it was just being blocked by one or the other side all the time. So thank goodness we've had a majority government coming through. And do you think that's what's allowed UK government, Peter, to kind of push through and have one message?
There's definitely a bit of that, Dan. I mean, what you haven't really had yet, apart from the bill that's gone through Parliament this week, you haven't really had Parliament having to debate any of the measures because the government got on with it. But it certainly would have stopped any of the sort of shenanigans behind the scenes if there'd been a minority government still trying to make these big, huge decisions. You just don't need that political background. I've got to say, though, I mean, I think, politicians in many cases rightly get the press they deserve, which in many cases isn't positive. But even if you look at the opposition parties right now, they've generally been quite supportive of what the government's trying to do, because we are in, the sums are eye-watering, how we get through this. It is a national emergency. I mean, they were the words the Prime Minister used on Monday night. So I generally think in this sort of context, the whole political class have by and large come together, and there hasn't been too much sniping from the opposition parties. But you're right, having that sort of strong government compared to, say, 12 months ago can only help.
Yeah, agreed. And Rebecca, in terms of strong messaging coming out, you're working quite closely with Jeff and the investment management team on passing messages across to clients. What have clients been asking this week? It's probably been a wee bit different to probably last week.
Yeah, very different to last week, Dan. So last week there was a lot of concern from clients. They were hearing the news every day. They were worrying about their investments. We didn't really know what was coming in terms of, were we going to be locked down ourselves? Would we be able to cope with that as a business as well? Clients were concerned about all of these things. Whereas this week, the conversation's a lot more relaxed. Markets have steadied out a bit, which is a lot more reassuring to clients. But also because we have that bit more certainty now as to what's happening, they know what's going on in their own workplaces. They're asking us about how we're working. So we're having a lot of conversation about where we are when we're sat working. We do a lot of video chatting with clients. So they're seeing all of these different backgrounds when they're calling in as well. Yeah. And the conversations are actually they're nice. We're having a chat about how they're finding working from home compared with how we're finding it. And generally, people are quite surprised that their service hasn't been interrupted whatsoever by that switch to working remotely, which is quite pleasant.
Yeah, and we've talked about this to death a little bit about True Potential, but the benefit of being a digital business was you just flicked, because your whole call center technology, Rebecca, is cloud-based. So as long as you guys have got the internet and your machines with you, it's as simple as you just woke up and didn't drive to work that day. You just switched it on and set up at your desk there. So that was good. Jeff and Peter, how are you finding working from home? I know it's only a few days in.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's been a little bit of a challenge at times, just given the internet connectivity. That's not been the easiest of times, but it's amazing what with hooking up a mobile to a laptop and off you go. So get a mobile signal, you can work. I think where it's been really interesting and just sort of reflecting on it is how you work with kids in the background. So apologies to anybody if there's a loud shout at some point during this, but with two boys running about at times, it is quite an interesting dynamic to work. But again, that's something that we're all getting used to. There's many others in a very similar position. So that's a dynamic that we're all getting used to. I think the other thing is just thinking about how we work with our managers as well and how we engage with them. And as long ultimately as we've got a telephone or an internet connection, we can speak to our managers. We can see what our underlying sub-advisors are doing in the fund. So for us, actually, and being part of a digital business, it's really just worked really well. I think the other thing around that is that it's shown up challenges for other businesses that say they are a digital business. But as you and Rebecca have said, Dan, we've just flicked the switch. We've moved to working remotely. It's been seamless, as Rebecca's been saying, for the clients. They've been surprised. But then if you contrast that with other businesses that should have been digitally savvy and have based their business on digital, that have really struggled. So if you think about Ocado, it's an online grocery firm. Now, clearly, it's going to have challenges given everybody wants groceries at this point in time. But the fact that it can't fulfill what is sort of its core USP is disappointing. And I think that shows the benefit of, preparing for these outcomes, but really thinking ahead. So for True Potential, thinking about digital has been at the heart of our proposition. And it's now showing why that's the case. It works like a flick of a switch. Yeah.
And I've got a similar issue to you, Jeff. I kind of live out in the sticks a wee bit, so that my internet's lousy too. So that's why I should have explained to everybody before. That's why I'm in the garden It's the only place I can get a 4G signal, but also the same as you, it's the only place I can escape from the children as well. They think it's fantastic that Dad's home. I'll tell you who doesn't think it's fantastic is my wife. She hates it. I've been chucked out the house and told off every single day. Every time I go in the kitchen for a cup of tea, it's, what are you doing here? I'm just trying to have a drink.
Don't you find that's the danger? Because actually the technology and the phones and internet, that bit's fine. I can do that. There's two things. The one is, as you say, Dan, it's almost the interruptions that is the tricky thing. But it's also the kitchen. You're in and out there, and the temptation is just to, I'll just go and get it. That's what's concerning me. Is I've got to almost like block myself from the temptation to just go and have another cup of tea and a biscuit, because that's not going to be good.
Yeah, no, I was speaking to one of the team at True Potential just 2 days ago, and their setup is in the kitchen, and they can actually reach the fridge from where they're sat. So that must be the real danger. At least I've got like 100 steps or so. I've took myself as far away as possible. So at least I can pretend every time I go for a biscuit, I'm getting half fit. Or getting my Fitbit steps in anyway. But yeah, not good. And Peter, you'll be in even more trouble if you're in the kids' playroom at the moment. So you'll have banging on the door.
I've got the numbers chart behind me. That is theirs, just in case you wonder that I need a numbers chart to add up. That is actually theirs. Yeah. But yeah, it's stepping over toys all the time.
Yeah. And moving back to just to business just for a moment. Jeff, you've mentioned about elevated volatility last week, and it's come back a little, and we've seen a fair few more green days, so to speak, on the charts. Do we think it's the end of elevated volatility? Is it going to flatten out? Is it going to be more, or who knows right now?
I think I'm probably in the latter camp. Who knows at this point in time? But what we can say and what we can see and we can evidence is that the actions that central banks are taking with liquidity is very supportive of financial conditions. Yeah. So effectively, if we can see a stabilization in financial conditions, that would be very supportive. What then we need to see is the economic stimulus package working its way through. That will mitigate volatility and allow volatility to come down. I think what we want to see is volatility just coming down from these very elevated levels. Why do we want that? Well, there are a lot of strategies that are based around volatility and changes in volatility. To be honest, I would be more comfortable if we could see the market not moving in 10 and 5% jumps. Yeah. Because from a mathematical point of view, that continues to be reflected as high volatility, given the magnitude of the swing. So I think what we're seeing is just people going from complete towards the middle of last week, the liquidation of portfolios and risk management really stepping in, and to a degree, the changes in market structure that we've seen over the past number of years, is the role of ETFs, the role of computer trading, algorithmic trading, etc., all kicking in at once. If we can get that started to normalize a bit more, then I think we can find a base from a financial conditions perspective, which then we just need to look at what is the real economy impact. And we're starting to get senses of that. There's the positive side of it. If we look at Morrison's, for example, they talked this week about the strength that they're seeing in food sales, not surprisingly, but they are benefiting from the situation. And more importantly, they're creating 3,500 jobs for people to come into their business and help at this point in time. So, there will be swings and roundabouts. There will be changes to how businesses operate. How have they done that? Well, they've decided not to pay a dividend this year. They're reinvesting that dividend into the business and probably into those individuals that they're bringing in. So we're starting to see changes there. Dividends are going to be reduced. That's a natural part of this. But volatility, hopefully, is starting to normalize. And in effect, the financial system is starting to normalize somewhat from a liquidity perspective.
That's good. And Jeff, just to finish on a point you mentioned before, you mentioned about ETFs and computer-based trading. Is that why you tend to see this big spike at the beginning of a market and then it kind of levels out, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there's part of that. So a lot of what you see at the start of the market, either the spike up or spike down, is people going in to try and place orders just as the market opens. You end up with an order imbalance between the buy and the sell side, and then the market is trying to effectively make that market, if you will, and that's what's driving that difference. So in effect, the market knows at times when the ETFs are coming in to sell, so then others can all take an equally opposing position to that. So I think from my perspective, how do we think about that? Well, I don't think people should try and trade at the start of the day or right at the end of the day. Yeah. That causes of these things, and you get, as you rightly say, these spikes in the market at certain points in time. So lack of, I suppose maybe even as well, the fact that people are all working remotely. So if you think about it, if you're on a trading desk in a large bank, you've got your colleagues around you who you can discuss things with. You can see how things are moving, how you want to position. When all of those traders are sitting at home or maybe in a business continuity station in one of the sort of the backups that they've got, not everybody's there. There's a lag between how people are acting, and that's impacting, I think, to an extent on market liquidity. Maybe not in the equity market, but definitely in the bond market.
Yeah, just those kind of organic conversations, I guess, which go around, which we all have in the workplace, and that's something I've found a little bit tricky at the minute. My job involves just a lot of meetings. It's a lot of calls. But what I'm already finding is I'm not having these I'm not bumping into the guys in the kitchen or speaking of how's it going with this. Big thing I tend to do at work is I walk around the desks and ask people how's it going, and I just have a bit of an eyesight test. Do these guys look happy? Do they look unhappy? And that gives you a feeling for what's going on in the world. So yeah, that's a really good point, Jeff, about the traders not having those conversations with colleagues or with kind of rival firms, so to speak. So yeah, interesting. And Peter, I think Jeff also mentioned about 3,500 jobs getting created for Morrison's, which is interesting. They've probably all come from Wetherspoons after that. Madman laid all of his staff off and then just said, go and get a job at the supermarkets. So I think, we're seeing a little bit of the worst of business with things such as that. We've seen, everybody's favourite Newcastle United chairman, Mike Ashley, trying to pretend his shops are an essential business, getting told off publicly the next day from government, or from Boris, I think it was. But then just on the day after, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, he also snuck in season ticket renewals for every single Newcastle United fan. So it's been a bad week for Mike Ashley, or a good week, depending if he doesn't care or not. But so you're seeing a bit of the worst of business. But I think you're seeing a lot of the best of business as well, Peter. I think I'll hand across to you. I know you talked about the C19 business pledge just last week. So a week on, Peter, how's that going?
Really, really well. You're quite right. What you've seen this week is a lot of focus on businesses that are slightly bending the rules a bit. And I think what I would say is that probably one of the long-term effects of this crisis that the country's in is that there'll be a shifting towards how businesses behave and how customers view businesses. And the businesses that right now focus not on the short term, but on doing the right thing, once they've secured themselves doing the right thing, they'll be the ones that bounce back quickest, I would think. So I'd expect that to continue. The C19 pledge that we, with David, launched a week ago. Right now, there's about 60, 70 companies signed up to it at the last count. That's about 450,000 employees.
Brilliant.
Nationally covered by it. So, I mean, some huge names in there, Dan, Asda, BP, Barrett, Everton Football Club. There's a contrast for you. National Grid, SSE, Persimmon, and of course, True Potential as well. So some really big names in there, and everyone doing their bit for their employees, for their customers and clients, and of course for their communities as well. So you are seeing, frankly, a lot more good than bad. It's just obviously the bad tends to be what makes it onto the TV, unfortunately, which is the way it is. But there is a lot of good work going on, and we're a week in, and I expect that to just continue.
Great. And I know that you and David have been working as well as the C19 side of things on some of the unisolated campaign.
Yeah, so we've got a new, through the Harrison Foundation, a new Facebook group called unisolated COVID-19. And the idea for that, Dan, is that clearly now it's not just vulnerable people who are effectively locked away now for several weeks. It's everybody, but particularly thinking of those people who are going to be isolated either in rural communities or they're just unable to get out at all for that one piece of exercise a day. If you are one of the more vulnerable people, you're not allowed to even really go beyond your own home and your back garden. So there are a lot of people now who are stuck indoors, and that's a tough thing to do for a sustained period if even your sort of close family can't even come round. So we've created this community on Facebook where anybody can go on, they can chat with other people who are in exactly the same position across the country, maybe share ideas of how to fill the time, because they can be very long days now. Share ideas of how to get by, how to keep fit, and books to read, all that stuff. We're not trying to be too prescriptive about what it is. It's very much meant to be, come on, have a chat, and let's see where it goes. And if the output of that is a lot of people make a lot of new connections online, then that's a really positive thing.
Great, that's good. And probably, Peter, if we'll have you back on the podcast next week, it'd be great to see the next week of progress with such a great initiative for that. Rebecca, I think, going back to clients, I think you mentioned earlier today you've been doing a lot of video chats, like we're doing now. So you're getting to see, or you're having to share your front room. So you're having to, well, I know you like to keep the house tidy anyway, because you've told me before you're always like, but probably everyone's probably had to think of keeping their workstations and what have you tidy. Are you finding video calls are your biggest incoming now, or is it still the telephone? Is it emails from clients?
Telephone's still very popular. We are seeing an increase in video phone calls, particularly with live chat. We're seeing an awful lot of people wanting to go through that route now. And I think people are now sat at their desks at home. So they've got that, we'll just quickly log in, we'll quickly have a look at our investments online, and then they're seeing the video features and the live chat features popping up in front of them. So naturally they go towards that route rather than the telephone, which they might have done previously. But it is nice when clients are in the same situation as us, where we're having these meetings from their home or our home. We're finding the phone calls are maybe going on a little bit longer because we're all sort of craving that bit of extra conversation. I think being stuck in the same four walls, and as you mentioned earlier, you miss out on just the hellos as you go through the kitchen and around the office. So we're starting to see a lot more sort of chat and clients wanting to stay on the phone a little bit longer to get that conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's probably linked with Peter's point about the feeling isolated side of things. I think it's don't underestimate how reassuring, Rebecca, it must be for clients to be able to see yourselves and just see some friendly faces as well. Because I know, kind of as a chief executive at True Potential, my other worry is in terms of keeping my staff's morale high and not getting everybody feeling isolated. So we're doing initiatives such as on Monday we're starting we've hired a local gym. They're going to be doing local daily or online daily workouts for 20 minutes for the staff, but we're going to make that available to True Potential clients as well on our Facebook channels. And I think, Peter, we're going to push it on the Unisolated page as well to help there. So that's one way, just keeping physical, keeping fit. But I think the other way is we're looking for bits of like team meetings. I think today we've got at 3 o'clock, 3:30, a bit of a round robin with the staff. I know next week, Esther, who's our office manager at True Potential's, booked in a virtual pub quiz for all the staff. So we're just having to think a wee bit different about not being in the office now and initiatives to kind of see everybody, speak to everybody, and remind our staff, remind our advisors, remind our clients that we're still here. And just because we're all self-isolating and we're in the house doesn't mean that life doesn't go on. So I hark back to what you said before, Peter, about we're seeing the best of business as well. Yes, we're seeing the worst of business, of course, and that gets the headlines. But don't underestimate what a force for good businesses and individuals out there are doing right now for their employees, for their clients, but also for their communities as well.
And there's some great examples, Dan, through the C19 pledge, as well as what we're doing that you've just mentioned at True Potential. I mean, people like BP, they've said they're going to supply free fuel to all the emergency services right now. Severn Trent Water, one of the sign-ups is created a special fund, a bit like what we've done through the foundation to support local charities and vulnerable people in their patch. So there's an awful lot more good than there is negative. That's absolutely the case. I wondered if anybody else has done you mentioned working and virtually, talking to colleagues and clients online. Has anybody done the friends night in down the pub online?
We're doing that this evening, 5:30 at the end of the day. We've got a full team beer club going on from our own kitchens.
Super.
I don't have any friends, Peter, so I've got no one having if you guys can stay on this podcast till 5 o'clock tonight, then we can all have a beer. That would be. But yeah, no, I think just similar to Rebecca, actually, a couple of the guys who I sit around with in the office, I mean, we're going to have a beer at about 5:15. We might knock off 15 minutes early today, and because we're working from home and hiding in the garden. Yeah, we may do the same, Rebecca. Have you had one, Peter? Is that why you're asking? Are you showing off?
No, not yet, but we're going to do our first one tonight and do a bit like this, have a few friends on and have a beer and see if we can just keep in touch, because that's all you can do. And it actually, I think I said last week on the podcast, it'll be interesting to see whether once we're through this, whether life does really just go back to normal socially, but also the way you work, or whether actually once we, now that we're getting on top of this technology and we can understand how to interact in that different kind of way, people who perhaps are less used to it are being forced to use it, whether it almost becomes the new norm. I don't know whether that's maybe too much of a jump, but I've got a feeling that life doesn't quite go back to normal in the way it was before. But we'll see.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? If you look on, say, if you look at the way I've been shopping the last couple of weeks, and you follow Facebook and things like that, there's a lot more local companies who've maybe, so I got a meat order in on, it was Monday before I was, not let out of the house. And that was from a local firm who were catering butchers to restaurants and bars and things like that. And they've had to adapt their business to now say, well, look, we've got a warehouse full of, beef, bacon, sausages, etc. Obviously, we need to get it out there. So they've opened public sales there. It was a really easy way to do it. And as far as you rang up, you ordered it, and then I drove to the warehouse, and reversed to the warehouse door, popped the boot. It says, "Is that Mr. Harrison?" Yes. And they just popped the 2 bags of meat in the back. And actually, A, it was cheaper than the supermarket, and B, it's better quality. And I was just saying this to Gemma, that my wife, this morning, that maybe this is the better way to shop from now on, where you're not, of course you go in the supermarket, but you're also working with smaller firms, more local firms, and because they've had to think different as well in terms of delivering and kind of, approaching the clients or potential clients in a new way. So yeah, Peter, I like to think some of the stuff we're seeing right now will maintain as life goes on.
I think it'll be businesses, Dan. I think also just you see the best in people. I went outside last night at 8 o'clock to put the bin out, and I got a standing ovation, and I didn't know why until I realised. But
have you been sat on that joke all morning, Peter?
I was waiting for the right moment to get it in.
Well, there it is. You found it. Jeff, I think you were going to say something before I interrupted.
No, I was just going to add that, ultimately change always comes from these things. And if we go back through time and we look at what's happened in past crises, be it Asia financial crisis, tech bubble, financial crisis, etc., there's always things that do change. Yeah. There is lasting change that come from them. And a lot of the times it's positive lasting change. And I think that's the thing that we kind of forget about, that we're in the middle of these things, that it's all the pessimistic side of things that gets you to look at news, gets you to read papers, etc. But there are the positive stories that are happening, and supporting local businesses, like you say, probably does change. Yeah. People maybe think differently about their high street. If you look at the high street today, it's kind of gone. But you've your large, big supermarkets that are there. But what about a local butcher, a local greengrocer, and things like that? Or those type of businesses, maybe they don't have a shop front, but they've got an online front. And that sort of changes, and that is a positive that can come out of this. And I suppose it speaks to the anti-fragile comments that we've made in the past about sort of learning from chaos and chaos coming through, and it helping bring about change, but it really businesses flourishing and growing as a result of that. So that can happen. It just maybe doesn't feel like it at this point in time when we're all stuck at home.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. I think it's this anti-fragility idea. it sparks innovation. I think it sparks a different way of thinking because you've got no other option. I think as humans and as businesses, you've got to kind of pull your socks up and adapt quickly, or you don't survive really. And I think even at True Potential, the last couple of weeks, we've brought out a new. We handle a lot of posts at True Potential, but we also send a lot of posts out. It's just the nature of being in financial services. But we've adapted what's always been one of our most paper-heavy processes for sending posts and packs out to client. We've made that fully electronic, and that was signed off just last night. Now that would have taken a lot longer in the past, but because you've got this kind of you've got to get on with it. You've got to make decisions fast. It's sparked the innovation. It's sparked the decision making, and we're all the better for that. So I couldn't agree more. Rebecca, are you probably two things from you, Rebecca? Are you shopping or working with your local businesses any differently? And second, are clients, again, I know we're early doors and they're just in the same boat as us in terms of being self-isolated. Are they saying anything different? Are they enjoying working from home, or they not?
On your first point, I think you kind of have to shop local at the moment if you want to avoid the crowds at the supermarkets. So a friend of mine said she went down to a local Morrison's the other day and she actually had a queue outside because they were doing sort of, I think it was a 10 in, 10 out system she said that they had going on. You can't get food deliveries from your big supermarkets at the moment unless you're waiting sort of 2 to 3 weeks for them to come. So I think it pushes people, and we've certainly been going down to our local shopping centre where you've got the butchers, the greengrocers, things like that there. And it just seems to be a much more convenient way to shop, whereas typically it would be the other way around in that the hours are more restrictive. But so for me personally, yes, it has made that shift. For clients enjoying working from home, I think they're like the rest of us in that we're all having to adapt to it. So there's parts of it that I think everybody maybe does like a bit more. So there's no waiting sitting in a traffic jam in the morning to get into work. You can get up that little bit later, things like that. But I think everybody like us is starting to struggle with the things like having the children at home and the lack of social interaction as well. So it's all just getting used to it. And I know in head office we're doing well, I say head office from our homes now.
Home head off.
We're trying to do a lot of sort of coffee breaks via web chats like this, in the same way that you'd go and have a quick coffee with your colleague in the office, just to make sure that you are still getting that bit of conversation. And we're having chats with clients where they're looking to do the same sorts of things and making sure that they are still FaceTiming their colleagues, their friends, their relatives, and keeping in touch that way. So yes, they are enjoying some elements, and other elements are maybe just taking that bit more getting used to.
Yeah, it's odd as well, isn't it? Because right now you've got large members of the population like us who are still working, and then you've got other population, the other bit of the population who aren't working at the moment because maybe they've got a more hands-on job where you can't work remotely, so they're either on 100% pay still from their employers, or they're moving on to this 80% furlong approach. So it's really quite odd, and that involves a couple of my friends as well. So a couple of my friends are just literally sat in the house now, and speaking to them yesterday, they just said, "I am sick." It's like, thank God you can do your job still, because at least it's keeping your mind active and things like that. So it's probably something we haven't quite seen the end of yet, because it's just beginning. But what are these people who have been kind of parked, so to speak, by businesses going to be up to for the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks? It's probably, when it was sunny a couple of days ago, they were probably quite happy, probably sat in the garden and having a beer. But on a misty day like today, there'd be no beer in the garden, a lot less fun. So,
and I think this is possibly where you start to see the best in people coming out, not just in businesses. So we're seeing a huge number of people signing up to the NHS volunteering scheme this week.
Yeah.
We've also had people in our area popping little leaflets through the door, just offering to help if anybody is stuck in and can't get out. So not an official charity, just a group of people who have got together, printed out a few notes and said, let us go out and help the local community whilst we've got this free time, we're fit and able to do so. So I think it's nice to see that in people.
It's nice to see. It's nice to, full stop from businesses and people and communities as well. So it's a good thing. Rebecca and gentlemen, I'm going to look to wrap up now. I think we're about 40 minutes in, so it feels like a good time. But before I do so, is there any parting comments from yourselves? Any last thoughts?
Well, I'll just say that just the point that Rebecca just made there about really anybody who's maybe been furloughed or just is stuck indoors because they can't do their job, that Facebook, the unisolated COVID-19 group, is really for anybody. It's not just for the more vulnerable people at the other end, who maybe is where the idea was first thought of. But of course, now the whole country is experiencing this. So no one needs to be unable to chat to anyone, or no one needs to be stuck on their own. So have a look at that page, and and I think through that, it's really a place that anybody can just chat with each other, make a few new contacts, and help each other through. And that's what it's all about.
Perfect, Peter. And that's called Unisolated C19.
Yeah, Unisolated COVID-19 on Facebook. So just search in the bar, Unisolated COVID-19, and you'll find it straight away.
Thanks, Peter. Jeff?
Yeah, I maybe just wanted to add that just for people to think about what's happened in China. Obviously, China was first into this. It's important that we don't sort of forget that, and actually it's potentially coming out the other side of this. So ultimately, that has been a period of 2 months where China's been impacted. But what are we seeing? We're starting to see factories reopen. We're starting to see internal flights in China come back. We're starting to see consumers out and about and spending money. And, anecdotally, I don't like to say it, but maybe the best way that we're going to see this is to look at pollution.
Yeah.
So one of the unintended consequences has been a very significant drop in pollution as businesses stop doing anything. But maybe if we start and look at pollution maps going forward, it'll give us an indication as businesses coming back online. And that's what we're starting to see in China, because I suppose people are skeptical about data. I think one of the things that you can't fake is pollution. It's real.
Yeah.
So some things like that, you are starting to see China come back. So as much as we could think this is a lasting issue that we're in, it will be lasting change, but we will get to the other side of it. And strong businesses and good businesses will be the ones that come out better the other side of it as well.
Yeah, and the Chinese point's a good one, Jeff. It was interesting to see Donald Trump was thanking the head of the Chinese government last night. They seem to be friends. He even referred to it as the coronavirus yesterday, not the China virus as well. So it's been a more mellow 24 hours for President Trump.
Yes.
Yeah. Rebecca, anything last from you?
I think we've kind of touched on it all the way through, and Jeff's just alluded to it there. Things are going to get better at the other side, and I think it's just staying as positive as we can do and making sure that we are still communicating, still speaking through routes such as Peter's suggestion with Unisolated on Facebook there, and with all our colleagues and friends as well.
Grand. Well, Rebecca, Jeff, Peter, thank you so much for this morning. I hope you enjoyed the garden and hearing the birds in the background my side, but really appreciate your input today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much as well for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. We're probably going to run a Q&A session next week, I think it's about 4 weeks since we last did it. So please do write back to us with some questions, some themes you want us to talk about, and I'll get the panel back together and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Cheers. Bye-bye.